This is a Nikon N2000 35mm film camera. I bought this when I was 16 years old, and it is the same camera that I taught myself photography with. And I was sitting there and I was thinking about it when I pulled this thing out of storage, and I was like, you know, we should really talk about shooting manual. What's up, y'all? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Chris Palmer, and today we are going to be talking about the 3 basic things that you need to know to start shooting in manual today. Get your cameras off of the little green auto button and start taking your photography to the next level. First thing that we're going to be talking about is aperture. Aperture is how much light is let in through the lens of your camera to the back of your camera. You probably have heard the terms f-stops. Now that is how aperture is controlled. So you'll probably hear like f1.4 or 1.8, 2.8, 5.6 or f8, 10, 11, 12, 22, whatever, you get the point. What that refers to is the opening within the lens. Where aperture gets to be a little confusing is that the smaller the number, say like 1.4 or a 2.8, the larger the opening in the lens. So that means it lets a lot of light in. So when you hear like open your aperture all the way, that's what that's referring to. Take it to a 1.4 or a 2.8, the lowest aperture on your lens to let as much light as you possibly can in. Now on the other side of that, if you're wanting to let less light in, you're gonna go up to the higher numbers like f10, f11, f12. And that aperture gets really small. The best way to maybe give a good analogy for this is your eyes do the exact same thing as your camera lens does. You know how you are inside in the garage and then you go outside and it's super bright out and you're like, oh God, my eyes. And it takes you a minute to adjust. That is your eye adjusting its f-stop to be able to see correctly and not blow out the image. So that is essentially what your camera lens is doing when it comes to aperture. Now, what we use aperture for is to create depth in our images. When you're taking a portrait or you're taking a picture of something or someone and you want to get the blurred out background that helps separate your foreground from your background, we call that bokeh. And then bokeh is created through aperture. So the wider your aperture, the background gets really, really blurred out. And then your subject in the foreground is very much in focus. So let me throw up a couple of images really quick. The first image that you see is shot at 2.8. So you can see that the background is really blurred out. And even the sides of my face are a little blurry, but my eyes and my nose, like my chest, stuff like that, that's more in focus. And then we go to the next image. It was shot at 6.3 f-stop. So you see that the background is just a little bit more in focus. My face is a little bit more in focus, and you're starting to get just a little bit more detail. And then if we take it up even higher to the next photo, which is shot at f10, then everything is in focus. So you have like my face, the sides of my face, all of the leaves and the trees and stuff like that behind me is in focus. But just remember that the lower the number of the aperture, the wider the opening of the aperture, meaning more light. The higher the number of the f-stop, like f22, the smaller the opening of the aperture and the less light that it's letting in. Just keep that in mind. Now, moving right along, we are going to be jumping into shutter speed. Now, shutter speed, going to keep with the same analogy of using your eyes, is how fast your camera lens is going to blink. If you're wanting to take pictures of, I don't know, your dog, and he's running, or he's shaking off a bunch of water, or you're trying to like freeze action, you want to have a really high shutter speed. So the first photo that I want to show you is taken at a really fast shutter speed of my dog Boba, and it was shot at 1/250th of a second. And that's really fast. And you can see like every drop of water flying off his tail. You can see the goofy expression on his face. Now the next image is actually taken at a slower shutter speed, and he's running. I mean, at like Mach 5 almost, chasing after my fiance. This was shot at 1/50th of a second. The slower the shutter speed, the more time that the back of your camera or your sensor has to capture what's going on in the scene. So the slower the shutter speed, the more motion blur that you're going to get. So I was panning along with him as he was like taking off, and I was just snapping a lot of photos, but my camera lens was only going really slow. So I got all of that motion within that frame. It's kind of cool. It's a little trippy, but another example of how to use it is, what if you're wanting to take a picture of a Maserati or of any kind of other car, and you want to show it like just like zooming by, then you're wanting to get like that slow motion blur, or that really good motion blur. So you're going to slow that shutter speed down, and then you're just going to like pan with the car to get the car in focus, but everything else is going to be blurred out. Or say you're wanting to capture, I don't know, a guy playing American football, and you want to see him like catch that football like midair, just you want to like just catch it and someone's coming, going to tackle him and just knock him over, and you want to freeze that, then you're going to just take that shutter speed up really high, and it's going to just capture absolutely every moment, every second. And if you have like nowadays, you could take like 30 frames a second with cameras nowadays. So being able to capture those moments are going to be so easy. Now, the last thing that we're going to be talking about is ISO. ISO is how sensitive the camera sensor is to light. What it used to mean is how sensitive film was to light. ISO is gauged in sensitivity from like ISO 64 to ISO 1600. You know, there's astronomical amounts of numbers nowadays. But ISO 64, ISO 100, and 200 are not that sensitive to light. But the higher up in the value you go, like up to 800 or 1600 ISO, then it's really sensitive to light. When you're taking pictures of something, okay, here's an example. So say that you are taking a picture of your family, and you're out in the shade and you're outside, and it's a bright day, but you have your aperture open. Remember, you want to take your aperture up to like f2.8, let all that light in, right? And then you're going to have a decent shutter speed to take pictures of, say you have kids, and you want to make sure that they're not squirming, and you want to capture them just right. So you put it at shutter speed of 1/160th of a second. And you have an ISO of 100 or 200 because it's really bright outside. But in the back of the camera, it still looks just a little bit too dark. So you're going to take that ISO and then you're going to bump it up a little bit, because another way to describe ISO is fake light. That's really all it is that you would bump it up to the sensitivity to the back of your sensor to allow more light to be captured. So that's a really good example of when you would use that. You're probably thinking like, okay, well, that's cool. I can just crank up my ISO to however high I want, and then it'll be perfectly exposed all the time. The name of the game of dealing with ISO is to keep it low, because the higher the ISO, the more film grain is going to be into your images. Now, digital cameras and mirrorless cameras have done a phenomenal job of making ISO grain noise and stuff like that just obsolete, but it's still going to be there. You know, even though you have technology nowadays to where it's going to reduce it a tremendous amount, and it's doing an amazing job doing that, you want to kind of keep the ISO as low as possible. Plus, if you need to bump it up just a tiny bit more after you've taken the picture, you can bring it into Lightroom or Photoshop, and then you can just boost it up from there. All of those things combined are what make a perfect image. And I know it can be a little bit intimidating from time to time, because you've got all these knobs to play with. And I mean, you're like, this is an old camera lens, and you're having to play with f-stops, and then you have to try to figure out like, how fast am I going to shoot? I mean, holy cow, this old film camera only went up to 2,000th of a second. Nowadays, you can get extremely fast shutter speeds. So we have come a long way. And guys, that is that's it for shooting manual. I mean, it is really simple. You just need to go out, play with your camera, try all the different settings, make the mistakes. Nowadays, digital cameras allow you to see exactly what you've taken right then and there. So you don't have to wait. So don't let shooting manual intimidate you at all. So hit that like button if you like this video, subscribe if you are not already, and guys, hit the bell so you get notified whenever I post new videos, and I'll see y'all in the next video. All right, see you later.